Welcome to the People's Health Briefing, a component of the Trusted Voices campaign. I'm Dr. Noha Abalada from Roots Community Health Center reporting for the week of December 28th. As health professionals rooted in Oakland, serving some of the people most vulnerable to getting and suffering from COVID-19, we're here to cut through the noise to give you information you can use to make choices that will keep you, your loved ones, and your community as safe as possible. The goal of the People's Health Briefing is to empower you with our best knowledge and thinking every Tuesday morning. Please submit your comments in the chat by direct message or by email to admin@rootsclinic.org. Now, we know that even though this pandemic is worldwide, the effects are very different depending on where you are. So we are here to give you up-to-date information about Alameda County and Oakland and East Oakland in particular. Alameda County now has 48,908 cases and 625 COVID deaths. These numbers continue increasing, and our East Oakland zip codes of 94601, 94621, and 94603 continue to have the highest positivity rates in the entire county. Now, let's take a look at hospitalizations, which are even more worrisome. Hospitalizations just continue to increase, and this line keeps going straight up like never before. As of Monday, December 28th, we had 412 COVID patients in the hospital. We have not seen this many COVID hospitalizations in Alameda County ever. And this is my fourth week in a row saying the exact same thing because the number just keeps on climbing and outdoing itself every time. Remember, our previous peak was in July at 213, and now we have passed that by almost 200 people and are now at an all-time high of 412 individuals with COVID in the hospital. When will it peak and start to come back down? We really do not know, but this is a particularly worrisome point in the pandemic. We have received a lot of questions about the vaccine, and we expect that those will keep coming and new information will keep coming, new vaccines will be approved and become available. So this is a topic that we will continue updating as we go. Now, in the absence of a vaccine, we know that the best tools we have to combat COVID-19 are to shelter at home, and if you must go out, mask and distance. If you do get exposed or get symptoms, isolate, test, isolate some more, and contact trace. But let's face it, this has not been enough. The numbers keep climbing. Our hospitals are becoming overwhelmed. I don't know how much longer our healthcare warriors, especially those in the hospitals and ICUs, can continue on at this rate. And I hate to say this, but it's truly getting harder to see a way out of this pandemic aside from the vaccine. And I have to tell you that I hate to say this because I have been hopeful at different times during this pandemic that something else would spell the end of the crisis. Somewhere back in March or April, I remember hoping it would just burn itself out like SARS did. But the way it's behaved, the sheer volume of infections and illness we are seeing, the fact that something we hadn't even heard of a year ago is now the third leading cause of death in the United States. And now the fact that we're 10 months in and we are facing hospitalization rates that are higher than they've ever been, these are all very discouraging signs. The other problem is how unpredictable this virus is. It can affect anyone. It can affect almost every organ system in the body. It can kill people we think should have just a mild illness. And it can have long-term effects like neurologic issues, memory loss, heart problems, breathing problems, and who knows what else, and who knows for how long these effects will last. We are concerned about a burden of disability and chronic illness that will remain in our community even after this is eradicated. So it really does behoove all of us to weigh this situation out very seriously, learn as much as we can about how we can get out of this pandemic, and understand that vaccines are one of the tools in our arsenal. So we need as much information as we can possibly get our hands on to make the best decisions that we can for ourselves, our family, and our community. And our purpose here is not to convince anyone to do anything, but to keep you updated on what we know and to pose the questions about what we don't know so that we can all make our best decisions. So first, I'm going to talk briefly just on basics of how the vaccine works. Vaccines basically all work by getting our bodies to make antibodies to protect us for if and when the real infection gets into our bodies. In the case of COVID-19, all of the vaccines, and there are more than a couple of dozen of them, work by making our bodies produce antibodies that attack the surface of the COVID-19 virus, specifically the spike protein. And I know we are all familiar with the spike protein in this picture of SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19. Now, to get our bodies to make antibodies, a lot of the vaccines were accustomed to use a weakened or inactivated version of the virus, and that gets injected into our bodies. And several of the COVID vaccine candidates that are under review will be using that kind of a platform. But the two vaccines that are approved in the United States currently are different. They do not use any actual COVID-19. They use mRNA or messenger RNA that is a code. Now, our bodies already have mRNA in them. And if you took biology, you might even remember the three different kinds of RNA: messenger RNA, transfer RNA, and ribosomal RNA. So we've known about mRNA for a long time, at least since the 1960s. mRNA is not new and it's not foreign. mRNA from the vaccine is designed to go into our cells to give instructions on how to make the spike protein, or at least part of the spike protein, and then the message gets quickly destroyed. So the mRNA vaccines are basically a temporary message with the sequence needed to give our bodies instructions to make the spike protein, or even a part of the spike protein, that will then trigger our bodies to make antibodies against it. The best comparison I've heard so far is that you can think of it like a Snapchat, a temporary message to your cells on how to make the protein, and then it quickly disappears. All of the antibodies we make and the whole immune response we mount is against the spike proteins of COVID-19. So then, if and when we are exposed to the real thing, a real COVID infection, we will already have the army of antibodies and other immune cells needed to fight it. So mRNA is not new or foreign, but this is the first time we have a mass-produced mRNA vaccine that has completed phase 1 through 3 trials and gone out to the market with such mass distribution. So naturally, we have a lot of questions about it. And the first question was really, how did this happen so quickly? And did any corners get cut in the process? This is a very legitimate question. Vaccine development normally takes years or even decades, so what gives? So there are a number of things that contribute to the speed of getting this vaccine out. One thing to note is that we had already learned a lot from SARS from back in 2002 and the MERS outbreak from 2012. SARS and MERS are related coronaviruses, and we already knew that immunity to those viruses was related to that spike protein. And we quickly figured out that this was going to be the case with COVID-19 as well. So we got a pretty good head start in that sense. We knew less than a month in that regardless of what platform was going to be used for a vaccine, whether it was going to be the weakened type or a vector type or a killed or inactivated type or an mRNA type, we knew that it had to be against the spike protein. And as I mentioned, all of the candidates so far are indeed focused on that spike protein. Another thing that gave us a head start is that the entire COVID-19 genome was completely mapped out by mid-January. In COVID time, information is getting out very quickly into the scientific community just because worldwide we are all grappling with the same situation. This is unusual. We are all investing in the same situation and we are all sharing scientific data on this same situation. So even though this thing only started in December of 2019, by January of 2020, we knew the entire gene sequence of the virus and we knew which part of the virus to focus on, the spike. So both of those things gave us a nice head start. Now, as we know, there are almost 30 vaccine candidates, but only two are approved, and they are both the new type, the mRNA type. So, what's going on with that? How did the mRNA vaccines get out so far ahead of the others? A few things. The science of using mRNA actually goes back about 30 years. There have been several applications, including research on vaccines for Ebola, MERS, HIV, and others. There have been phase 1 and 2 trials, including human studies, like this one we found from 2015, that have been published, and they were human trials, and they showed very good safety data. Now, these were small studies, and we never got to use them on a large scale. Thank goodness we have not needed them on a large scale. We've never dealt with such a scale as we're dealing with now with COVID-19. So these were very different from our current situation. One thing to know about the mRNA vaccines, though, is that once you have the platform for making an mRNA vaccine, now you have the platform to make any mRNA vaccine. All you have to do is change the sequence to your new target. So the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines are basically using a platform that was already ready to go once we had the gene sequence for COVID-19. So basically like a plug and play situation. And for a similar reason, mRNA is also fast to manufacture. It's synthetic. They don't have to fuss with killing or deactivating an actual virus. They are just mass producing these protein sequences. And also for a similar reason, mRNA goes through certain parts of the approval process faster than other vaccines. Why? Because the FDA actually has to approve the manufacturing process, which is a lot of unique steps for each unique virus when you are doing an inactivated or a weakened or a vectored vaccine. Each one is going to be different. But for RNA vaccines, we don't have that problem because, again, it's the same exact manufacturing process each time. The only difference is that sequence. So that part of the FDA approval process was also able to go faster. Another thing that enabled the trials to go faster is that in order to establish how effective a vaccine is, you need to have enough exposure and enough cases to determine what percentage of the time it protects you or not. And in a lot of the other viruses that I mentioned earlier, we just simply did not have many cases at all. And it would sometimes take decades just to have enough natural exposure to be able to determine how effective the vaccine is. And again, with COVID, we've never seen this kind of volume. There is just no shortage of people getting exposed to COVID-19. So that part also went faster. And the last reason we found, which is a huge reason, is the money. Let's face it, there has been a lot of money poured into this endeavor to allow the pharmaceutical companies to just go full steam ahead, which they would never otherwise do. Pharmaceutical companies have never been so motivated to make a vaccine ever, and the government really helped by taking away the risk for the companies. In fact, the drug companies were able to manufacture the vaccine before it was approved because of this. Now, that is pretty much unheard of. Imagine if you're a business owner and you make a product. It's the difference between you putting in all your own money to make a product that you aren't even sure is going to sell versus you have pre-orders and even guarantees that you will be compensated for your efforts. So the companies basically were able to do several processes in parallel instead of having to wait for step one to finish to then go to step two. All of the steps still had to happen, but they were able to run them simultaneously because money makes things move. Now, what about the clinical trials? This actually took a standard approach to determine things like the dosage, the safety, the side effects, and how effective it is. And what they were looking for with how effective it is does it prevent any type of infection at all? And then also secondarily, does it prevent severe disease? So as far as COVID disease of any severity, they wanted to see it be at least 50% effective. And these mRNA vaccines surpassed that by quite a bit. And what they found is they are about 95% effective at preventing any type of COVID infection. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. They also wanted to see if it prevented severe disease. And what they found here was pretty remarkable in that it actually appears to be preventing severe disease nearly 100% of the time. So even in that small percentage of people who got an infection, none of them got severe COVID disease. And that is pretty remarkable. The expectations as far as how many people would be in the trial were the same as with any other. They wanted to see at least 3,000 subjects in each age group, and we actually had much more than that, and there were over 40,000 people in the clinical trials overall. They also wanted to see good representation of different racial and ethnic groups, which they did. They actually did a much better job than usual, and they got good representation across the board there. And all of this is detailed in the over 50-page documents for each of these vaccines, which actually can be found through the FDA and the VRBPAC documents. And that is the review board that actually is going to continue to monitor the safety of these vaccines. They also wanted to see enough data in those over 65 years of age and in people with common conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. And what they found is that there was no significant difference in safety when you looked at these different groups. And there was also no significant difference in effectiveness when you looked at these different groups. So on both safety and efficacy or effectiveness across all these different age groups, race, ethnicity, as well as comorbid conditions, there was even safety and effectiveness. Now, one of the issues and challenges about doing this as an emergency use authorization is that we only got 2 months of data from the second dose to getting approved and letting it out into the general public. Now, when it comes to safety, we really don't expect to see adverse reactions after about 6 weeks. So 2 months should be enough time to see the majority of adverse reactions from the vaccine. That's what we've seen with other vaccines, but again, ongoing safety monitoring is continuing, and it's going to be really important, especially as this vaccine gets to more people and into more subpopulations of people. There are no surprises yet as it relates to safety, other than regarding the allergic reactions. So people with severe anaphylaxis were actually excluded from the trials. And so once it got out into the general population, we have seen a small number of anaphylactic reactions. So now we know what to look for. This is treatable, and now the protocol does include being observed for about 30 minutes after administration of the vaccine. And we may, now that the vaccine is out in the general population, we may see other special situations like this. We will be keeping a close eye. Again, that is really the only one that we have seen and that we have concern and have actually altered the way that we are administering the vaccine by having the observation period be prolonged. But this is something we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on. But as it relates to how effective it is, I gotta say, we really do need to pay close attention here. I feel a little funny saying it's 95% effective when we can really only say for sure that that's the case for 2 months. It is looking like it will be significantly longer than 2 months, but how much longer? 9 months, 12 months, 12 years? We really don't know. We have vaccines that run the gamut from being good for only a year to being good for a decade or more. So we just don't know this yet about these vaccines, but we will only know that with more time. So it is possible that we'll need boosters in the future, but hopefully by then we'll have gotten things under much better control and it won't be such a major task to try to deal with the issue of decreasing immunity over time. Now, what about side effects? And here again, I'm only going to be talking about the mRNA vaccines. And you can see that for both Pfizer and Moderna, the top 4 reactions are the same in order. Injection site reactions, which majority of people get, fatigue, headache, and muscle pain. And then other symptoms include joint pain, chills, and fever. And I really don't like to call these side effects. These are more of expected results because the immune system is designed to respond to these things. It is designed to respond to something that is a threat, and that is what makes us produce the antibodies. So, redness and soreness and achiness and even fever are all potentially expected reactions that let you know that the immune system is working. It's building up those antibodies needed to fight the infection, and these symptoms typically last 1 to 2 days. It's a little less severe in older age groups, which makes sense because the immune system is less reactive the older we get. And it also appears to be a little more significant after the second dose. So, this is something to bear in mind as you think about scheduling, getting the vaccine. It's expected that you will have some of these reactions. Not everybody does, but please do plan accordingly. There are a few very important things that we still don't know about the vaccine. As I mentioned before, how long will the vaccine make us immune? We just don't know. And this is a very important question. Most likely, it is looking like it will probably be around a year, but again, only time will tell. And only time will tell if it will be different in different groups, if it will be shorter or longer for people who are elder or for children. These are all things that we are going to have to continue to watch. And these are all things that are knowable and that scientists are monitoring. So every month that goes by, we will learn more and more. Second, does it keep people from spreading the virus although they don't have any symptoms? Well, we really don't know that either. In fact, we really have never had a very good handle on what is going on with people who seem to spread the virus despite not having any symptoms or asymptomatic transmission. So it's no surprise that we still have a lot to learn here. And we really do need to know the answer to this question because it will be a big determining factor in how soon we can go back to some semblance of what life was like before COVID. But either way, once we get to the point of having 70 to 80% of the population vaccinated, the idea is that COVID will no longer be able to spread as it is now. And so the answers to these questions will still be important, but we'll have much better control overall and be in a much better place to deal with these finer points. In the meantime, with this remaining amount of unknowns, you'll still need to mask and distance, vaccine or no vaccine. However, know that if you have had the vaccine, the chances of you getting COVID are much reduced, and your chances of getting severe COVID or dying from COVID appear to be almost eliminated. Lastly, we currently do not have enough information to really evaluate how effective or how safe the vaccine is in a few subpopulations, and those are children under 18, those with immune compromise like HIV, AIDS, or sickle cell, those who are pregnant, and those who are breastfeeding. Now that the vaccine is in the general population and people in these categories are choosing to receive the vaccine, we will surely have more data soon. Also, trials in children and young adults are underway, so we will be keeping an eye on those as well. Now, someone who is considered the father of modern vaccines, Maurice Hilleman, was responsible for developing more than 40 vaccines, including measles, mumps, hepatitis A and B, H influenza, rubella, pneumonia. His vaccines have saved millions of lives and eradicated many of the common childhood infectious diseases that we all receive vaccines for. He was quoted as saying something like, he doesn't breathe a sigh of relief until the first 3 million doses have been given. Now, I don't know how scientific this is or if it was an intuition thing, but when someone has that much experience and expertise, I definitely think it counts for something. And I think it's worth taking note of those who were experts and leading scientists who came before us. So where are we now? We are pretty close to that 3 million doses. In the US, at least 2.1 million vaccines have been administered. That's how many have been registered by the CDC. I imagine it is actually much more than that. And another 625,000 in the UK. So we are very close to that 3 million. So far, Since December 13th, there have been 2.1 million doses of mRNA vaccine administered, and 0 deaths have been attributed to the vaccine. On the other hand, in the same time period, since December 13th, there have been over 35,000 deaths from COVID-19 in the United States, and hundreds of thousands more who will likely suffer long-term impacts of the virus. This is what we know now. If you have additional questions about vaccines or anything else we can answer, please submit them in the chat by direct message or by email to admin@rootsclinic.org. Until then, please shelter indoors as much as you can whenever you can, but only with members of your household. Don't share your air. Mask up, space out, protect your elders and those with underlying conditions. If you think you were exposed, don't go to work, don't gather, isolate yourself, get tested in 5 to 8 days, and continue to isolate yourself until you get your results. Take a multivitamin supplement and consider additional vitamin D supplementation up to 2,000 international units per day. Check with your doctor if you're pregnant, nursing, or on chronic medications. That concludes today's People's Health Briefing. Thank you for joining us. Please tune in next Tuesday at 10 a.m. See you then.